Coming up on The World Today. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Iran should expect larger waves of strikes and military action. Gulf states find themselves on the front line of the Middle East's newest war in Iran, as Iran targets U.S. bases in Gulf following Israel's fresh attacks on Tehran and Beirut, and United Arab Emirates sues for peace as Iran's retaliatory assault on the Middle East continues for a fourth day. Welcome everyone to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. We begin in the United States, where Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says a U.S. military submarine has sunk an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean with a torpedo. Mr. Hegseth did not name the ship, but the Sri Lankan Navy reported earlier that around 150 people were missing after an Iranian ship in the Iris Dana went down off the coast of Gaul. At a press conference at the Pentagon, the Defense Secretary suggested that more military action was imminent on Iran. When asked about the bombing of a girls' school in Minab in Iran, Mr. Hegseth said that the U.S. was investigating it and refused to be drawn on if there was intelligence about which country's munition had hit the school. Mr. Hegseth also said Iran tried to kill U.S. President Donald Trump, telling reporters that the U.S. hunted down and killed the leader of the unit which attempted to assassinate the president. Meanwhile, the UK is planning to send a warship to the eastern Mediterranean after attacks on a British base in Cyprus, and that's expected to set off before the week ends. In the meantime, Israel has launched a fresh wave of strikes on Iran. The Israeli military says it has also launched new strikes on Beirut and Lebanon. Israel has been launching new strikes on targets in Iran and has warned of retaliatory attacks. Several people are reportedly killed in the Israeli airstrikes across Lebanon, where Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Iran has continued its own strikes around the region, with Saudi Arabia saying it has intercepted 2 cruise missiles. Iran's retaliatory assaults on the Middle East continued for a fourth day, with latest reports of a fire outbreak at the U.S. Embassy in Dubai late Tuesday night. This comes hours after the UAE government's media briefing, giving residents and visitors updates on steps being taken to manage the crisis. The nation's Minister of International Cooperation, Reem Al-Hashimi, is calling for negotiations to de-escalate the situation, which many fear will not end soon. Here's more from our UAE correspondent, Mayowa Adegoke.
We'll showcase how our nation's economy can handle this crisis with finesse, thanks to its diverse, open, and globally prepared nature.
UAE's Minister of Economy and Tourism has announced the opening of safe air corridors, which will accommodate up to 48 flights per hour as part of a regional emergency plan in coordination with other Gulf countries and the International Civil Aviation Organization. While assuring residents of food security and price stability, the minister cautioned against panic buying, noting that the nation's reserve can serve the population for up to 6 months. Other UAE leaders at a national media briefing Tuesday afternoon shared the government's readiness to continue defending its territory, while calling for negotiations as the only way to contain the crisis.
That even though the situation is dire, we're keeping a level-headed approach. We're not looking to fuel more conflict, and we know military solutions aren't the answer for lasting peace. Our region could really do without this kind of escalation.
Earlier in the day, a fire outbreak in the Fujairah oil industry zone was credited to falling debris, according to local authorities. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defense says it successfully intercepted 11 of 12 ballistic missiles and 123 drones fired into the UAE airspace, bringing the total number of weapons to 186 ballistic missiles, 812 drones, and 8 cruise missiles. While the government continues to manage the attack from Iran and its resulting impact on the economy as well as residents, the stock market remains shut while majority of residents continue to work from home. Government and private organizations are now offering free mental health care support to residents as the crisis entered its fourth day. From Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Maya Wadigoke for Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has called for an immediate halt to escalating armed conflicts, describing the ongoing war as madness that's costing innocent lives. Mr. Ramaphosa insists that dialogue remains the best path to resolving conflicts. He also reaffirmed that South Africa recognizes its responsibilities as a global citizen, expressing his country's readiness to contribute to any peace efforts.
Issued a clear statement that we want a ceasefire. We want this madness to come to an end. And Donald Trump is very busy right now. He's got a war on his hands. And obviously, if the opportunity were to open, we would talk and say there must be a ceasefire. Dialogue is always the best way of ending conflict and then ending war. And we want this war to come to an end immediately. We're losing too many lives, and unnecessarily so. South Africa is always ready to play a contributing role, either in mediation or whatever. And if a gap opens or if we are asked, we always live up to obligations. We're a global citizen, and we therefore can play whatever role the UN would like us to play.
The United States Embassy in Nigeria has cancelled all visa appointments scheduled for today, citing a high potential for protests in Abuja amid escalating hostilities between the United States, Israel, and Iran. Disclosing this in a statement via its website today, the embassy warned of potential demonstrations in the Federal Capital Territory, calling on American citizens to remain indoors. The embassy strongly recalls that previous protests by some groups had resulted in violent clashes between the protesters and Nigerian security forces. It therefore recommends that all U.S. citizens in Abuja remain in their residences. The warning comes 4 days after U.S.-Israel airstrikes targeted and killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Let's bring in Vice President, Association of Foreign Ambassadors of Nigeria, Ambassador John Ejinaka, who joins us from our Abuja studios. A pleasure having you on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so it's a tense moment in international relations. Right now, U.S. President Donald Trump has indeed voiced significant disappointment with the UK's handling of the situation following the joint U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran that began on February 28, 2026. What do you make of this, taking of diplomacy into consideration?
Well, it's an issue that is confronting the international community now, and a very serious one as such. The position of the United States with regard to the UK position has to do with the old existing relationship between the two countries. And at this stage, the US expects that kind of collaboration from the UK. But the UK Katmaya has stated they are not yet ready to be brought into the crisis at this stage. But I know that with the drone attacking Cyprus, that the UK is trying to shift from that position and also trying to take some measures to defend that territory.
Do you think the UK will eventually be drawn into this, seeing that, some of its own bases are also under threat from these attacks?
Yeah, of course. When the attack comes, everybody is conscious of the implications and the possible outcome. And we know that Iran, presently like a wounded lion, is reaching out to different sections and trying to bring in a number of countries into the crisis. So the UK, in their own part, is also, though they are being cautious because they are moving a ship to the area, but the Prime Minister has said it will take up about 3 days before the ship will move.
And then Gulf states have found themselves in the middle of this crisis. They're saying all red lines have been crossed. They are weighing their own response to the conflict. This is a war that the Arab governments didn't want and tried to prevent and avoid. The question is whether they'll be drawn into it by what they've called the treacherous Iranian attacks.
Yes. From the onset, as you have rightly said, the Gulf states don't want this war. They did all they could to ensure that diplomacy took its course, and that instead of having a war, we'll have a peace. And that was why they played a greater role, mediation roles, up to the time the mediation collapsed, actually. So, but you know, the Iran has a target on what they want to achieve. Some of the Gulf states are hosting some of the American bases, and then they see those bases as targets. Initially, they say, "Oh, it's just the bases that are attacking," but you know, there are also collateral damages, and there have been some attack outside those zones. We've seen some drone within close to a hotel in Dubai, and then other places. So, well, what they are doing presently now is defending, trying to make sure that those drones or missiles don't cause much damage in their country. It's how long are they going to maintain that position as long as the crisis draws on. It's what your guess will also be as good as mine.
Right, and could this be Iran's strategy to raise the stakes for its Arab neighbors in hopes that they will increase pressure on the U.S. to end the war?
Well, that is the target. In the first place, we know that most of the Gulf states are petrodollar countries. And if there is anything that will impact on their economy, on the source of their resources, that is any attack on their oil fields. And also we know that the Strait of Hormuz is also the passage, not just for the oil, but also for the importation of food. So they are very much worried that the longer the crisis, the more pressure. And of course, Iran would have achieved their goal if they're able to pressure the Gulf states to compel the United States to think of a way out of the crisis. But at this stage, I think it's too early to call.
Right, and military bases have been across the U.S. have been ordered to step up security, and also here in Nigeria, the U.S. Embassy in Abuja has, given urgent warning to citizens to stay alert. Has cancelled visa appointments for today because of the protests that were recorded in Nigeria a couple of days ago. Where does this lead us? Well,
you will continue to see such actions because the U.S., first of all, take the interest of its citizens anywhere in the world. Very important. So there should be those kind of alerts, and then wherever they have their citizens or their interests look to be at stake, they take extra precautionary measures to ensure that their citizens are not put in harm's way. So if you look at the case of cancelling the visa process in Abuja, it's because they felt that they have their own information that there's likelihood of a demonstration in Abuja, and then they made reference to when it happened before, the outcome and the consequences. So it's the same measure they're taking everywhere across the world.
And finally, we also understand that the U.S. president is in active talks with Iranian opposition groups and other Kurdish leaders. Do you see the opposition taking over the leadership mantle as supreme leader? That's in Iran.
Well, it is too early in the day to say. What I know they are trying to do is to instigate the Kurdish to maybe start some crisis internally, and which will now result in uprising. And that is actually the target of first eliminating the leaders. And when the leaders are eliminated, taking into consideration the recent demonstration all over the country that resulted in the killing of over 50,000 others. So we are looking at it from that perspective, because you may not win a regime change from the air except you have some internal arrangement. And I think that is part of the gambit.
Right. Ambassador, thanks again for your time.
Thank you very much.
And still to come on the program, more on the crisis in the Middle East. British nationals stranded in the region due to be flown home from Oman on a government-sponsored flight. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Europe is confronting a new wave of geopolitical tension as the war in the Middle East escalates. The conflict has exposed divisions among European partners, forced governments to reassess security vulnerabilities, and intensify debates about Europe's role in the crisis. For more of this, let's cross to Berlin to speak to Thomas Sparrow, a correspondent with our partners DW. Hello, Thomas. Great to see you. Let's start with Germany. Where you are, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz traveled to Washington for a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. You know, what was he trying to achieve, and how did the meeting go?
This was indeed a pre-planned trip by Friedrich Merz to Washington. In other words, it was not a trip that came about because of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. However, it was clear that the trip was overshadowed by what is happening now in the Middle East and not by other topics that were important to Friedrich Merz and the German government, like trade, tariffs, and the war in Ukraine. Specifically on the conflict in the Middle East, it was important for the German Chancellor to stress that he and the German government are on the same page with Washington when it comes to getting rid of the regime in Iran. However, the German government was very cautious not to criticize Washington and Israel for their strikes, and this has been a very important distinction when it comes to the German position on the ongoing conflict, a position that, by the way, differs to other European countries. For the German government, and in particular for the German Chancellor, it was therefore a very important meeting in the White House. It was a meeting where the German Chancellor was able to present his position, but also European Union positions on the conflict and on other topics as well. Specifically on the other issues like tariffs and the war in Ukraine. Those are two issues where Germany does not see eye to eye with the United States, where there's a lot of need for discussion, and that's why this particular meeting was relevant not only because of the ongoing tension in the Middle East, but also because of the other topics that were key from the outset, from the beginning, even before the war in the Middle East started from a German perspective.
And what divisions, Thomas, exist among European partners regarding the conflict?
There are divisions. Now, this is not necessarily unusual. The European Union has 27 members. So when you have a very big political story, a very big conflict going on, it is actually common to see differing views within some of those 27 member countries. But this is also problematic because the idea for the European Union is to present a unified response, to also play a role when it comes to resolving some of these conflicts. And that is made difficult if the different member countries can actually not see eye to eye. In this particular case, the view presented by Germany, which we discussed, differs from, for example, the view presented by Spain. Spain actually criticized the US government very strongly. It also did not allow the US government to use its bases for attacks towards Iran. That is something that was criticized very strongly by the US President Donald Trump during the meeting with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. And what's interesting from this perspective is that during that meeting, during the open part of the meeting, Friedrich Merz did not defend its Spanish counterpart. Friedrich Merz did stress that after the meeting, in the private part of the meeting, he did speak to Donald Trump about Spain and defended the interests of Spain as a member of the European Union. But there is certainly potential for controversy and for problems between Germany and Spain now because of that. As I stressed, Spain did not allow the US to use its bases for attacking Iran. On the contrary, the UK, which is not a member of the European Union, did allow the US to use its bases. However, that did not prevent a controversy also between Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, and Donald Trump. So what we're seeing is a lot of bilateral tensions, and the interest from the European Union perspective is to try and find a unified response, also with partners like the United Kingdom that are not part of the European Union when it comes to how exactly they're going to position themselves in this ongoing conflict in the Middle East.
Right, and while the leaders are making decisions whether to be a part of it, whether to ignore the war, or just, be on the fence about it, how are European citizens reacting to the ongoing tensions in the Middle East?
With concern, especially here in Germany, there are specific issues that are a matter of concern. One of them is the state of the economy, which was already a big topic in Germany for Germans. But now, if the ongoing conflict continues, if oil prices and gas prices rise, this is something that ultimately can affect the German economy. And as you may know, the German economy is absolutely essential to Germany's international position, to Germany's international clout. So that is one element. Now, it's not exclusive to Germany. We see this also in other European countries as well, that there's concern about what this war could actually have as an economic impact. A second element is security. So on the one hand, what this means for European defense when it comes, for instance, to its defense towards Ukraine, how they will need to reassess maybe part of that to also take into account what's happening into the Middle East, but also security here in Europe, because there's concern from an intelligence perspective that this could lead to attacks here on European soil, specifically from Iran or Iran proxy. So those two issues are a matter of concern. Now, a third issue is how long this war could drag on, and that was something that was also evident from the meeting in Washington between Friedrich Merz and Donald Trump, with Friedrich Merz stressing that he stands on the same page with the US when it comes to getting rid of the regime in Iran, but that there are important questions about what Merz described as the day after. So there are questions about how long this could actually drag on and what the solution or the potential solution to the conflict might be. So important elements to discuss: economy, security, how long this war could drag on, also what kind of role Europe could play in. We spoke already about the issue of the military bases when it comes to Spain or when it comes to the United Kingdom, but there are also other issues at stake, and this is something that is certainly being followed very closely here in Europe.
Right, Thomas, thanks again. Well, staying with the issue, the U.S. military has named its first troops killed in the conflict with Iran. 6 soldiers died when an unmanned aircraft system evaded air defenses at a command center in Port Shuaiba, Kuwait on Sunday. 4 of those killed, all U.S. Army Reserve soldiers, have been identified as Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant Noah Tetgens, Sergeant Nicole Armour, and Sergeant Declan Cody. Captain Cork, a Florida resident, had previously deployed to Saudi Arabia, Guantanamo Bay, and Poland. Sergeant Armour of Minnesota previously deployed to Kuwait and Iran. Sergeant Tetgens, a Nebraska resident, had twice before deployed to Kuwait. All 3 were decorated service members. The United States Central Command initially said 3 soldiers died in the attack, but officials confirmed on Monday that the death toll had doubled after one person succumbed to injuries and 2 more bodies were found in the rubble. These 6 are the only fatalities confirmed by the U.S. military since it launched a new war against Iran with Israel. Well, British nationals stranded in the Middle East are due to be flown home from Oman later today on a government-sponsored flight. At a session in the Parliament, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer told members of Parliament that there would be 2 more flights in the coming days organised by the government to get people home after Iranian missile and drone attacks in the Gulf grounded flights. And there will be 8 commercial flights leaving the United Arab Emirates as scheduled. The first flight is due to leave Oman at 7 p.m. tonight and comes as more than 130,000 Britons register their interest in being helped to leave the region since the war between the U.S. and Israel and Iran escalated. That's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.